All right. So, anyways, it looks like we're having a live stream begin again. Sorry to some people who were they saw the sort of live stream prompter come up with the countdown, but it put me on as like a different channel, not this channel, which is weird. I guess I must have tried to open this in the wrong channel, or I did something weird or something. Who knows? But anyways, it is nice to see you all this lovely evening. And on this live stream, I think I just kind of wanted to do a live stream in general because we haven't done one in a long time. But our topic for today is going to be race and Russia. This is something that if I were maybe a good documentary filmmaker, like we've had on the show many times, Matt Arrett, who is definitely a successful documentary filmmaker. I don't have the patience for it. And this is one of those kind of topics where there's a lot of things in my head. And I think I'd rather just kind of do it as a live stream rather than trying to fight to make it fit into a video. Or who knows, maybe tonight I'll be able to organize my thoughts and put this all into a video later. And if you guys have any questions after we talk about our main topic, as is the usual rule, we're just going to jump over to a Q&A. The Q&A could be about the American Village. It could be about really anything because generally I'm pretty open-minded to having anything come up. But so anyways, now that we're recording, I guess we should get into our main topic, which is Russia and race. And again, this is one of these things where recently I've been kind of finding myself forced into this weird sort of artificial wedge, kind of between a rock and a hard place where essentially there's a certain group of people who still kind of look at the world like it's 1930. And then opposed to them tends to be this sort of blue pill group that thinks that everyone is just going to always be happy and be nice to each other, and niceness solves all of our problems. Yay. And so I kind of wanted to dispel the way that these people look at things. So first off, when we talk about Russian race, we kind of have to go back deep in time. Okay, if we go back to the Roman Empire, now where I'm getting this information from is a guy called the Metatron, who's a very interesting character there on YouTube. But anyways, he put together a pretty well-documented bit about how Romans actually saw race, because it seems like that's one of his big things on his channel. People ask him about what homosexuality was like in the Roman Empire or ancient Greece or ancient Egypt or whatever, or racial issues. He seems to, it seems like people, especially younger people, don't seem to understand that certain things today that might seem to be to us to be important issues were really non-issues in the past, especially homosexuality really wasn't much of an issue at all. In fact, this whole idea that there's this status of there's these sort of types of people that have these sexual orientations, that didn't exist in the old world. People didn't really look at it that way. Just some people did stuff. And as they had said, the Greek and Roman worlds, it was never a bad thing if you were the one doing it to the other person. So that's a very, very different way of looking at reality. But that's how we're going to have to talk about race today. Because according to Mr. Metatron's research, the Romans sort of saw the world as having three races. Now, we also have to remember that the Romans were aware that somewhere like China existed, but they didn't really go there. They didn't know what Chinese people looked like. So you have to take a look at the world through their eyes. It was a world that had the Middle East and Europe and Africa, mostly North Africa. That was their universe. And so they kind of saw things as in being there were sort of three strips. There was the upper strip of the yellow people, which is supposedly because they were the people who had the potential for blonde hair, which were what we would call like Germans or Scandinavians, Slavs as well. Basically, all the people from the cold places in Europe were one race. And they, who we would call today, Italians or whatever. Of course, the Roman Empire stretched pretty far. So Italian, Southern French, Spanish, Greeks, Northern, the parts of Algeria and Libya and Tunisia and Egypt, that are all by the Mediterranean Sea, well, and with Egypt even farther, Judea, the Levant, and all that stuff. The Iberian Peninsula as a whole, although I kind of mentioned that already. all those people in there were all considered one race. That was a sort of, I forget what the term they used was, but they sort of saw the entire Roman Empire as essentially, interestingly enough, being ultimately one sort of super group of people. Now, obviously, the Romans didn't have a particular respect for anyone who didn't speak either Latin or Greek. So, you know, when they, I don't know what language the Carthaginians spoke, but I'm going to assume they spoke something different. So when they went over to Carthage, didn't have a lot of respect for them. However, they may have seen them, again, although the Romans didn't really see the world in racial terms, when they did sort of think of things in these greater visual groups of people, they saw themselves as uniquely distinct from the Northern Europeans and also for the people below them in terms of geography, being the Africans, the sub-Saharan Africans, or what we call today black people. So the Romans also came up with their own theory that looking at the world, which is also important, is they looked to the south in Africa and they were like, well, these people, maybe besides like some of the Nubians, don't have a lot of cool stuff. They don't seem to have great empires or great structures or this or that. So there's something wrong with that, something inferior. And then when they looked up to the north today, where, you know, Germany is and, you know, like the Czech Republic and Poland and Russia, and I'm not sure how much contact they had with, say, Scandinavia, but, you know, Scotland, England when they went over there, so on and so forth, all the places where it snows, they saw the same thing. They saw the same thing as in Africa. Not a lot of great structures or great culture or great empires, just kind of people and huts. So the Romans apparently saw racially that essentially things up too high were too hot or too cold, and things down below were too hot, and something about that they were in sort of the Goldilocks zone to create this sort of great cultured race. So certain Roman thinkers that this Mr. Metatron quotes, although there weren't that many, because again, this is kind of a looser thing, because they weren't really racial obsessed as we are today, because we're racial obsessed because we, if we're from the Western world, we look at everything through the lens of all that good old colonization. Whereas if you live in Russia, which didn't have colonies, you don't. That's the nice part about living in Russia. It opens the mind to new experiences. It's like the spice melange in Dune living here. You just breathe it in and you can see new realities. But so anyways, this Roman perspective is very, very interesting because they sort of created this racial narrative that put them as the superior ones, but they also excluded a lot of people who would consider themselves today to be part of this grand white race that people keep telling me about. Whereas even when I was in high school and all that, I kind of got the feeling that I was definitely not welcome to that party. And in fact, even Italian Americans, I believe at certain points in U.S. history, weren't really considered white either. So anyways, we're going to start to sound a little bit here like our good woke colleagues in San Francisco talking about whiteness. But this is all going somewhere. You guys have to have faith in me. If you're fans of my work, then you have to have faith in me that this is all going somewhere ultimately, okay? Anyway, so we kind of covered Rome. And then we have to kind of move forward to, again, so we again get to this idea of the whole like colonial empires. And if you look at Brazil, right, or somewhere like Central America, you had sort of the natives and you had the African slaves, and then you had the people who were kind of mixed. And then you had sort of the European conquerors and sort of this hierarchy, a hierarchy that would look something like, although in America, you could never really say that the natives were ever part of a hierarchy because they were never really allowed inside of society. Lot less intermarriage and assimilation with the natives. But regardless, something more familiar to an American audience. And there's this one very famous Brazilian painting. I can't remember the name of it, but every time there's a discussion on race that's actually very interesting, they always bring up this painting because it essentially shows something like an elderly black woman and her mixed race kids, and then like the daughter's married to some guy who looks like a Spanish prince. But anyways, it kind of shows that they had this idea that in Brazil that eventually the demographics would just sort of shift, that everyone would kind of look the same and kind of look Spanish, Portuguese. And that, so that's also a very, very different way of looking at things. It was almost like, well, we do have a racial hierarchy, but it's eventually just going to kind of fade out on its own. That's fascinating. It's a very interesting painting. Maybe you could find it. Look for something, I guess, like Brazilian racial family painting. Very, very interesting concept that you can all sort of, if we just intermix enough, we'll all become the same race. Very interesting. Very, very different. But again, this is a very different perspective on these kinds of questions here. I just want to bring up. We're going somewhere with this. Another thing that's very important to recognize is how much Koreans and the Japanese and the Chinese, and if you're talking about like the Chinese and the Vietnamese, how much they all hate each other. Guys, there's nothing that causes more racial hatred between people than being geopolitical and geographical neighbors. I have seen I don't know. I'll put it this way. Anytime there's any sort of little problem between the big three, at least the Koreans, the Japanese, and the Chinese, the racism just comes flying out. If they're in China, they'll say no Japanese come into our store. In Japan, they'll say no Chinese come into our store. Very, very, very fired up. But I bring up their particular hatred of each other more so than, say, in the Balkans or what other place is a hotbed of hatred? Israel and the Levant and all that. Plenty of different ethnicities and religions there. But because, according to our American Western stereotypes, all Asians look the same. And yet, people in the core of Southeast Asia do not really ever see themselves as some sort of race brothers. You'll never hear people within China being like, well, what they did in Nanking was bad, but we're part of the same race. They don't talk like that. They don't think like that. And especially when it comes to like the Japanese and the Koreans thinking about the Chinese, who they very much poo-poo on because of apparently it's dirty there or something. You are not seeing this sort of race identity that people always talk to me about. So we have another sort of, way of looking at things. Great. Let's move the geography and the clock somewhere else. Let's go up to, how about we talk about World War II? Now, remember when the Germans wanted to, what was the whole point of World War II? It was to create living space and for them. And how would they create living space? By killing the inferiors, which are the Slavs and the Jews. The Slavs and the Jews in the same bucket together, the same absolute category, according to the Germans. Interestingly enough, after 1,500 years since the end of the Roman Empire, the Germans saw the Italians as not being of a different race, although the Romans saw the Germans as being of a different race. And so they were fine. The French with their lovely black hair and sometimes big schnozzes were also fine. But the Slavs were the enemy that had to be, and the Jews were the enemies that not only had to be defeated, but had to be exterminated for reasons to meet up with the trends of the time after the rise of Darwinism. Okay, so we then try to move these different sort of ways of looking at the world. Oh, and I even forgot to talk about Russia. This is Tim Kirby Russia. Well, we have to look, too, at Russian history. So what if we go back to the times of, say, Ivan IV? We go from the very earliest leaders in Kievan Rus, the whole system of all these different princes, and we go up to Ivan the Terrible, where there's still sort of mostly feudalism. Things start to change a little bit after that. Obviously, feudalism ends in the mid-1800s. So maybe we can even push the bar farther into the future. Let's go some kind of early 1800s way of looking at the world. So you could see that within Russia, although then again, Ivan IV's period of history, it's just so much easier to break down. So anyways, you have your Tsar, Ivan IV declared himself to be the Tsar. You have your elites, the Boyars, who are the rich guys there and the traders and all that. And then you have sort of your warriors and craftsmen and all that. And then you have the base of your medieval society, the peasantry. So you definitely have in any medieval society, things are very much organized into a hierarchy that everyone can feel and that everyone is aware of. This is not a secret hierarchy. This is a hierarchy that slaps you in the face daily. But the thing is, if you look at the Russian hierarchy, everyone kind of looks physically the same. Now, obviously, the rich guys want to, show off a little bit, and they have nicer clothing than that. But ultimately, the Tsar and the boyars and the elite or whatever, and merchants and soldiers and all that, and the peasantry physically look very, very similar. And when Russia expands to include the Tatars and include other groups, apparently, I always knew that around the time of Ivan IV, they actually had the one Muslim Tsar. I know it sounds insane. We'll talk about him one day. Bek Bulatovich, Simon Bek Bulatovich, who converted. But apparently one of his wives was also like a Kyrgyz princess at one point. But the wives of Ivan IV did not meet particularly happy destinies. It was a rough time. Not because of him, because of other circumstances, more because people hated him. It was the opposite of Henry VIII, although I just watched a documentary movie that tried to say that they were the same, which is also interesting about the way people can be so bigotous about Russia, as they said that Ivan IV was the equivalent of Henry VIII when he is even accused of killing none of his wives. So it's amazing. What a brilliant comparison. Okay. Anyways, I'm starting to lose my track of thought. But anyways, his Kyrgyz princess was good enough. We go to Pushkin, who was also, descended from important people from Ethiopia, so on and so forth. But so you kind of see that within Russia, when you get into all these different minorities and territories, as long as everyone converts to Orthodoxy at some point and they're kind of members of the aristocracy, not super important. But to be honest, you squint enough, Russians and Tatars look kind of the same, which is not surprising. So anyways, you get into this society that's lived really about Russia through, medieval times and up until the end of the maybe Soviet Union, maybe a little bit during the Soviet Union. You can see some textbooks that repeat the sort of 1800s logic of there's three overall races, the Mongoloid, Negroid, and Europeoid, I think. Europeoid. Those three races, you'll see that in the Soviet textbook if you look hard enough and if you're in the older classes. So they did sort of talk about that, but it was really never a part of Russian history. It certainly was never part of a political history. There was never this phase in Russian history. They were like, boy, your eyes are a bit too slanty for you to be involved in the elite. That wasn't how it was, and it never was. Okay, so I'm hoping, and also about this Soviet textbooks that displayed, these traditional Darwin era, first half of the 20th century looking at race. I'd really recommend you guys looking up the term haplogroups. Very interesting, because it looks that when we really talk about our genetic last name, that people should really look into these haplogroups and really how human beings are sort of divided and what ways are we really actually similar on like the genetic level, not on this sort of like superficial visual level, but on a real genetic level. And Slavs are not part of the West on that level. They're maybe kind of similar, but they are not part of the West. So our haplogroup is different, and I guess the Third Reich guessed correctly about that. Isn't that lovely? But ironically, when it's sort of also really your dominant genes passed down to the men of your family line, this is something that's important. Really determine what this sort of racial haplogroup you're in. I think there's 20 of them. So also that really shows that we're a little bit more racially diverse than we would think. And it's also interesting that this haplogroup thing of this sort of again, they said in this interesting documentary that it was like your genetic last name is actually passed down man to man to man to man to man. So really, this lines up with the Russian tradition that whoever your father is, that's what ethnicity you are. So that's one of the things we're getting to. So if you were born in the Soviet Union, I presume the Russian Empire, but I'm not quite sure, but definitely the Soviet Union, definitely in modern Russia, you are essentially asked who your father is. So if you're Armenian, if you're basically whoever you exist. If your father was Armenian, you're Armenian. It doesn't really matter what your mother is. Okay. If your father is Korean, then you're Korean, so on and so forth. That's the way this sort of tradition is, which is, again, very different. Because one thing I even thought of as a child is, especially one thing that I wanted to scream when Obama was president, because they said he is the first black president. And I always wondered, why do we round towards blackness? If his mom was white, and his father was Kenyan, which would make him look completely African, and his mother was completely non-African. He was sort of half and half, right? But he's rounded to being 100% black. Why? And I noticed that too in Cleveland. If you are like 1/8 African, and you look even slightly African, let's just say you have the sort of African hair, you're black 100%. Why? Why is that? So in Russia, one of the interesting things about that is that phenomenon doesn't exist. It's like, who's your dad? He's Armenian. And now if you are half Armenian and half black, you're probably going to get a lot of stares in Russia, and people are going to be like, Armenian? Really? And you have to deal with that for the rest of your life. But after you, presuming you're a man, and you have kids, and they become Armenian, and the next generation doesn't look so African, everything works out. So again, these ideas of race, again, are very subjective, and they're very different. And what's one of these other things that happens with this? So say, for example, you might be wondering, okay, well, Armenians exist within the context of like the greater Russia, okay? So even if you don't speak Armenian, but your dad was, and his dad was, and his dad was, that has some meaning to it. You know, you could be born here in Russia and live your entire life in Russia, not particularly speak Armenian or not speak it at all, and still feel some kind of connection there, because Armenians are sort of linked with their historical destiny to Russians, right? That would be the same thing for like Chechens, okay? Same kind of issue. Maybe there's a few relatives from other ethnic groups in there, but it doesn't matter by the Russian logic. Whoever your dad is matters, right? Well, what if you were French? And here's the interesting thing, is if you're French, there really is no massive group of French people here. So maybe the first generation might even call themselves French, but then what happens? So you become the grandson of someone who is French. You're the son of someone who's French, doesn't speak the language, isn't connected to it, probably had to convert to Orthodoxy, and there is no tied French-Russian destiny with some sort of French-speaking Russian region and all that stuff. What happens? You become Russian. Interesting. Imagine if that's how things worked in America. It'd be a much different country, especially since we tend to view things in terms of race rather than ethnicity. Who's your dad? He's white. Well, then my friend, I don't know, stereotypical black name. Well, Jamal, guess what? You're white now. Or especially his son would be, no matter what his son looked like. So again, when the more I'm starting to develop this big American Village project, and the more that Kirby Russia, the sort of political thing becomes, I definitely would not say that this is a big project, but we're achieving some success. I mean, we're getting subscribers here and there. People are watching the videos. I get a lot of offers to do interviews, so apparently someone watches this, this material. But, you know, as you kind of go down the line, I'm really getting to get encountered more and more into this group that they're just locked in with this, like, you know, antebellum South racial hierarchy. This is the way things are, and it just doesn't really match the reality of a lot of history and the reality of like especially the way that things have sort of worked in Russia. And they're very, very and I'll put it this way, there's a certain group of people who seem to have a very vested interest in trying to portray Russia, especially to foreign people, in fact, pretty much mostly to foreign people, in this sort of racial hierarchy filter, whether they're trying to sort of demonize Russia by making it look like it's this white supremacist nightmare hellhole, or whether they're actually trying to advertise it as such. Both versions are completely false. That's not the way things generally work here, and I'm sorry to disappoint you, but it really doesn't. I think in the future, it's again one of these things where, because the West always refuses to try to think outside of its own box, we are still stuck, to be honest. If you think about how long ago real colonization, and someone's going to say in the chat, but I'm a Marxist and colonization continues to this very day. Okay. But like real hardcore colonization, when did that end? That's been a long time ago. And you'd think we'd be able to maybe find some sort of new way to sort of perceive our ethnic makeup or something. But no. Everyone's happy. They're happy with that sort of first half of the 1800s. And it's just kind of frustrating, especially living here where history is just completely different. And I keep getting told by these people that it's the opposite. It's like, nah, man. And so one of the other problems is why I feel like I'm kind of stuck in this wedge is because after hearing this, that group of people, our dear friends, the white nationalists, are going to say that I'm some kind of cuck, that I'm going to be for open borders and I'm a secret rainbow boy or whatever, when I'm not. I do believe that there is extreme importance in protecting your cultural identity. This is a part of human instincts. Human beings are very, trust me, as I've said probably many times in my political material that you may already be sick of, you've already been sick of me saying, but I should repeat, is that tribalism is the most ignored factor in ideology and politics and human history. Human beings are extremely tribal in their mentality. Factor number 2 is probably sex. I might change my mind about which one's more important, but sex has a huge role to play in politics and human history, and yet we really don't take it into account, or the people who do are weird sex perverts in San Francisco who are looking for gays in history. I mean, people who actually think about like the gender dynamics of how things work and, sort of where war comes from, this, that, and the other. But anyways, human beings are extremely tribal, and we can either try to fight this, which won't work. You are not. I think the tribal mentality that human beings have to sort of break off into groups and hate each other and war with each other is so at our base that I guess we have to fight it a little bit. But to be honest, I don't think we can. So trying to think that we should embrace multiculturalism and we're going to be on a global world, of course, that's not going to work. And it's just going to essentially bring misery and suffering to anyone with that position, because their tribe will be destroyed. So, again, I just kind of want to talk about this particular topic because it's a weird one, because it's a really long one, and hopefully one of you guys is a documentary filmmaker, because like I said, I'd actually really like to put together a well-researched documentary about this kind of topic, about all the different ways that people literally have looked at race throughout human history, and how in our Western political discourse, there's one way to look at it, and there's not just one way, but everyone is absolutely sure to the point of a complete lack of questioning that it could be any other way. So that's frustrating. And the other frustrating thing is being shoved in this wedge where it's like, if you don't play the white nationalists, if you don't jump through their hoops and kiss their butt, then you're the bad guy. You're a secret gatekeeper. You're a servant of Zion or something. And if you don't do the other side, then it means you're a hate monger and you're a monster, and that you have no respect for their cultures and human life and all this other stuff. So I guess, guys, I just want to kind of talk about how ultimately being stuck in this position, how ultimately stupid it is, because that's not really the way that human beings operate, and just how dumb this whole racial concept is. Anyways, guys, I think I've kind of said my piece here today. So if anyone has any questions, they can say. Remember, I forgot to say at the beginning, I'm getting bad at this. Oh, no one wrote any. If you write any message under where it says Telegram live stream starts in 30 minutes, that means that I can respond to your questions or comments. To be honest, if you write anywhere in the chat, I'll probably see it. So why don't I just do that right anyway? John Derp says Mr. Metatron got wrecked by YouTube like 2 days after he came out with that video on homosexuality and antiquity. Oh, of course. Oh, of course, John, because, a video that would, or like this video, that would might get me in trouble too, that raises these fundamental questions that our current view on human sexuality only exists now. This is very much a post-World War II Western, modern, postmodern view on sexuality, whereas in the ancient world they really didn't see things this way. Now, with human sexuality, obviously there's a lot of things that go back. Men are physically lustful, and since sort of the beginning of human history, generally you have man as provider protector, woman as providing comfort for men, we'll call it to be polite, and doing the mothering, taking care of the homestead. Men going out, women staying sort of back on the home front. Like, these things are, because they're gender-based, they tend to be more universal. Like, sometimes people asking me about Russian women, pretty often. But to be honest, I think a lot of sort of gender issues between men and women are actually have a very solid universal base, with only sort of the cultural part kind of on the exterior. So anyways, but I kind of got a side point, but yeah, Mr. Metatron got screwed because human history challenges and in some ways demolishes these views on sexuality pushed by the rainbow freak crowd. So yeah, they basically demonetized his channel, and they are stonewalling him now. Yeah, well, you can't demonetize my channel because my channel can't be monetized already. So they can take it away again. They can take it away, but that would be sad. I don't know if they take this channel away, they might that might be my final end. I might have to. Oh boy, I don't know. Go back to writing articles or something. So sorry, I clicked instead of on the live stream. Don't worry about it. Kathy writes everything that is on a different video. Someone sending me Putin stickers. Thank you very much. Is that Nate? Nice to see you, bro. Nice to see you, bro. Always good to have you here, man. But yeah. So again, so I guess we're not only race, but in terms of sexuality. Oh, someone found the picture. Oh, I'm going to share this. I'm going to share this with no description because I'm extremely tired. Look at that. That's the description of Ham's Redemption. Where we can see, so it's actually now in the main Tim Kirby Russia hardcore. Someone found it, the painting where you can see the old African grandmother and then her like mixed race daughter, and you see the guy to the right who is very Portuguese, very Spanish looking. And he's looking down at the white baby, and it's like, oh, everyone's going to become the conqueror racial group, and this is going to solve our problems. So imagine that. Imagine that the person who made this painting, this is an old painting. This isn't like modern trendy stuff, but this is a real sort of school of thought that actually existed and maybe even exists in Brazil of, okay, we have this sort of racial diverse problem. We can bang our way out of this. We can just bang our way out of this, bro, which is a very macho way of thinking. And in some ways, guys, if you, I've been told by a lot of people that, they don't really see the sort of like diversity that's in Russia between like the people from the Caucasus or the Tatars, and like everyone kind of looks the same. Everyone looks the same in Moscow. There's no diversity. Well, there is, but it also is because Russians tend to have that more conqueror attitude that the Spanish had of, how about we have sex with everyone? So I think that there's a lot of intermixing, and I think that that's one of the reasons why Russians are also such a large ethnic group. And I don't think I got to it, but when you have this policy that the Russians do about how, okay, so I am the father, I am this ethnicity, I have a son, doesn't matter who the mom is, that son carries my ethnicity. Well, what does that mean functionally? From a functional sort of standpoint, what does that mean? That means that men can go out and take foreign wives. No problem. Or take wives from other people within Russia. This policy is very much a policy of sort of sexual conqueror. Ooh, let's get spicy with this live stream. Let's get the feminists mad today. Yes, this is the policy of what a sort of sexual conqueror looks like. Because if we look especially at sort of Jewish history, well, if you're a man, you have to stay within your community because the ethnic identity is passed through the mother. So that means when guys are looking for a wife or whatever, they can't go outside the group. They have to stay inside the group. Whereas with Russian men, they can go wherever they want and take somebody back and have Russian kids. See how that goes? Yeah. So another interesting thing when we're talking about race and ethnicity, if you want to talk about a group that is kind of that way. Now, see, with the Chechens, they agree with this whole thing of if your dad's Chechen, then you're Chechen. But you have to be able to prove you're Chechen through something they call the tape. It sounds like the word tape in English, but it's one of their words. It just happened to work out that way. Your tape extends to 7 generations. So in order to truly be Chechen, you have to be able to trace that paternal lineage 7 generations. And it's one of the reasons why when I was there in Chechnya, I was talking to one of the imams, and they kind of had a big scandal where one Chechen woman wanted to marry a guy from Azerbaijan. No, very similar type of Muslim guy, but they're like, no, can't have it. Can't have it. She's leaving their ethnic racial group. Not allowed. So very interesting. Very, very interesting. And again, there are so many ways that we could look at this issue in the West, and yet we don't. And this is one of the reasons. I guess if there's anything that I would tell you is good about living in Russia, maybe recently with this whole American Village, I've been focusing on some of the practical things. But you get the chance to live in a completely different historical reality where every historical event is different. The opinions and stuff are different. It's a completely different reality. And the one thing that I'm always sad of is that I'm not going to be able to live 3,000 years that I could really like master Chinese and Arabic and who knows, Thai, and be able to really enter those sort of like information spaces that they have. I'm sure there's probably tons of brilliant, crazy revelations to be had, but human beings do not live long enough for all that. And I am already old and tired. John Derp writing, I think what people miss about America is that as a nation, it has been subject to never-ending internal migration. And not only that, the government constantly removes the levers of power from local communities while passing laws against families, which has created this atmosphere of fear that leads to tensions between all groups, no matter how marginal their differences. Maybe. Yeah, I would say, John, well, we definitely have in the United States, well, there's definitely a lot of race baiting. I mean, we have seen some crazy race baiting. We have the self-hating baby boomer liberals who took the real, one of the real sort of tenets of like the post-World War II Western world is, before World War II, the West was absolutely 100% certain about its own total moral, cultural, and ethnic superiority. And that was a good thing for that, in their opinion. After World War II, nothing changed, only now they consider that to be a bad thing. That this unfair advantage is somehow evil, this privilege, inherent privilege is evil. So we have this this plague mentality doesn't help. Trump tried to kind of turn that around, but unfortunately Trump didn't quite have the voice to speak to the black community that maybe certain other people would. He did okay. Because he could speak in terms of money, where at least while I still had Facebook, all the black guys I knew were doing actually much better than before, much better than under Obama. But, yeah. So, yeah, are a lot of the sort of racial tension problems in America somewhat, I don't want to say fake, but blown out of proportion, hyped up? Oh, definitely. Obviously, it's going to take a long time for people to not be salty about slavery, and especially too because with the whole civil rights thing and all that, you know, it wasn't that long ago. You know, people still remember that, so it's going to take us still a while. But what would be even better is to propagandize the hell out of people towards some sort of more global American identity, and that'd be amazing. But they're not going to do that. I think that identification with being black, even if you're 1/8 of African origin, goes back to the one drop of blood thing. Then again, you see this kind of racial diversity along class lines in a place like New Orleans to this day. Well, yeah, Chris, that's what I'm bringing up. Because, so for example, with like Pushkin, who I guess would be then 1/8 black, right? He was 100% Russian. So there you go. Or would he be 1/4? Wait, my math is bad. 1/4, excuse me. So yeah, again, I guess it does go back to that. But again, why? Why not? Because like we just looked at that picture from Brazil. Apparently the artist who made that picture of Brazil thought the opposite. He was like, well, he's got a bunch of the genetics of the great Iberian Peninsula conqueror race. That kid's going to be doing A-OK into the future of Brazil. John Derp definitely does 100% the his answer because America refuses truth and reconciliation process. Yeah, well, I'll tell you one thing, John. I recently released that video to be a little bit funny, but Dave Ramsey, financial specialist, Dave Ramsey. I'm going to share that video again just because I feel like it. And you can't stop me, especially if I can find it. That's the hard part. Okay, let's see. I have to open up a Microsoft Excel document. I keep all my videos in a Microsoft Excel document with their like locations, with the hopes that I could easily share them and share them more often, and yet I don't. So this is one sort of weird thing about me. Let's see. What did I say? Dave Ramsey knows nothing about life beyond Tennessee. That's a fantastic video title. I love it. So anyways, I don't even know if I shared this to the group. I'm so out of it lately, guys. I'm sorry. This American Village thing is really taking its toll on me. But anyways, we're going to share that. It's on the main page. You can watch that because, I even try to be not fake humble, but Dave Ramsey really is a freaking smart guy. He really has helped a lot of Americans, but it's amazing. Talks about something going outside on the United States, outside of the United States, complete ignorant moron. And it's the same thing. I've been watching this one financial analyst who I really want to do an interview with, like really want to. I've written him a couple emails. He hasn't responded. And he really does a brilliant job of breaking down like how the Federal Reserve System works. But recently he like read some article about China that has that nice mainstream media spin to it. It's like, dude, come on. That is not the way the world outside of America works. So one of our main problems is that generally all of our experts, be they these experts in quotes who graduate from our lovely liberal universities with some sort of liberal arts degree with a master's degree in butt painting or something, from them to even some really intelligent people, like, for example, the Hoover Institute, which I like when they talk about America. But again, as soon as these guys talk about something outside of the only version of history that could possibly exist, they are morons. Very, very heartbreaking. And that is one of the reasons why we have these racial problems in America. We can't take a look at other cultures, other types of historical experience, maybe find solutions. Nope, not going to do that. We are, America was started in 1776, god dang it. And to be honest, America restarted in 1945, and 1945 to present is good enough, god dang. So, yeah. Anyways, Matt is writing, the Russian Federation has multiculturalism, but in the way that actually works. I like where this is going. If you are a Russian or another traditional ethnic group, you can have ethnic pride, identity, and celebrate your heritage. While that doesn't put you at odds with other groups doing the same thing, freaking exactly. And if you want to talk about the model that could, a model in terms of ethnicity and ethnic interrelations, America has a lot to learn from Russia. Like, a lot. Again, one important caveat. If you talk to any sort of ethnic group that's maybe salty with Russians or they're angry about something, they're angry about the first half of the Soviet Union during the revolution and counter-revolution. Besides that, the 1,000 years of history plus before, and the now soon to be 100 years and a couple decades after. Everything's working out. You're going to see, but the Chechen War, all foreign mercenaries, they settled it quickly. Everything's going fine. That was sort of a result of anger from the Soviet Union, especially during mid-Stalin. Let's see. In America, we are told that either A, there's no such thing as a people with a shared identity, which doesn't make any sense, and no one actually believes. Exactly. That's what I'm telling you about tribalism, man. We are all part of a tribe. Even if right now you go to Thailand, people in Thailand are generally very friendly and polite, you know. Yeah, I'd say they're pretty polite. Yeah. They're also kind of not aggressive, you know. If you go to Thailand right now and I'm presuming you're an American or British or Australian or whatever, and you start talking to Thai people, even if they kind of speak English, or if you meet someone from Tennessee, you can have a much more kinship with the guy from Tennessee. You just are. You're going to look like him. You're going to speak the same language. You're going to be able to talk about the good old days when Joe Montana threw the football and all that stuff. All right? There's a certain kinship. We are born into tribes. This is the whole like Tower of Babel factor, that there can't be this one united humanity. It's just not in the cards. It is not the way human beings are organized. And in Russia, we seem to acknowledge this and live with it. Whereas the West is eternally fighting it because the West is liberal. And if you're a liberal, all that matters is the individual. Get rid of labels, man. Don't label me, man. And B, he said, we're told, let me, because this is actually a very good point. Let me go back a little bit. So Matt wrote, in America, we are either told that A, there is no such thing as a people with a shared identity, which doesn't make any sense, and no one actually believes. B, that other groups are the enemy. There you go. John continues. So if you end up with the George Floyd situation, where obviously Floyd shouldn't have had the police put, and you want to talk about a tribalism thing, and again, this shows how in a lot of ways tribalism trumps everything, because with George Floyd, if we think of things, if the Constitution is supposedly sacred, he was already in custody, and they killed him. We all know that's against the rules. But then comes into the tribe thing of some people relate to the policeman as their tribe. Some people relate to George Floyd as part of their tribe, even if he was definitely not the nicest guy on the planet. Good enough. They killed our tribe guy. They're trying to oppress our tribe guys and get their careers ended. Done. That's all it takes. One spark of tribalism. Yep. This, anyways, I'm not even looking at the does anyone want to raise their hand and talk? I'm sorry. I'm not even looking. I'm a terrible live stream host. No one wants to talk. Well, that's good. I didn't miss anything. Matt Nelson. Okay. Huey Long probably came the closest to creating some form of record. You want to know something that's crazy? In Russian, on VK, there's a Huey Long fan group. Can you believe that? Who is the guy who runs that? Who is some Russian person who is like this, what was he, a governor or a state senator or something? Rogue governor, I don't even know how to describe his political positions. We'll just call him Rogue Governor Huey Long. This is back in the 1930s? Definitely in the black and white photo era. And beloved by at least one person in Russia. Crazy world we live in. Huey Long probably came the closest to creating some form of reconciliation and putting the people first. He didn't deny that white people were a distinct group with culture and interest, but he told the Klan that they'd get themselves shot if they caused trouble, while also affirming black folks had interest and were a part of Louisiana, without creating a victim mentality that spanned racial animosity. Quote, I'm for the poor man, all poor men, black and white. They have all gotten a chance. They got to have a home. Oh, they all got to have a chance. They got to have a home, a job, and a decent education for their children. Every man a king. That's my slogan. Huey Long. I don't know about the every man a king thing, but every man worthy of being considered human. There we go. That's nice. We'll just change history there. Happens all the time recently. John's writing, I don't know if you remember, but I predicted the Nord Stream attack 2 weeks before it happened. I don't have a solid prediction now, but in regards to your topic, the moves of the Biden administration lead me to believe that they are trying to start an open civil conflict based on race as the theater in Ukraine goes against their plans. The constant claims by Biden that white supremacy is the biggest problem in America and the never-ending provocations of the media target the way blah, 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 is going to be deployed there as well. I think Kosovo will actually be resolved peaceably. Okay, that was a big one there, man, but are things coming to a head? Possibly. That speech that Biden gave with the red background, like the devil's speech, where he had like two Marines in the background and this like burning red lighting, and he said that basically every person who voted for Trump is a potential fascist. Not good. Saying that the number one problem, he especially said the military is sort of like the white supremacy stuff. Ooh, this is very much going from conspiracy theory to conspiracy fact here, man. Not looking good. Yet another reason to move to Russia. Another reason. He's not helping anyone with this nonsense. There are a lot of folks stuck in 1991. They drank the Fukuyamade. Oh my gosh. Oh, that's so good. Oh, that's so good. The Fukuyamade. Oh, guess what? That just got shared to the main channel. That's amazing. I'm going to even put that in my saved messages. That's brilliant. The Fukuyamade. Magnifique. So very nice. And you may think, Tim, you're speaking very slowly, quietly, and you're going on a share fest. Have you drank any alcohol? No, not a drop. I'm just very, very tired. But that was an amazing, amazing pun. I've never lived anywhere but Tennessee in all the 35 and almost 36 years of my life. Only problem here is good old boy network. Yeah, good old boy, man. God dang. Well, I don't know. Can't you join the good old boy network? Or are you secretly from Mexico or something? Or your ancestors, I mean. Why can't you join the good old boy network? Is it possible? Or is the good old boy network really, really rich? That's not so easy. In Russia, there's apparently some sort of club that like a few of the patriotic billionaires where they all meet. I'd love to be a member of that club, but got some patriotism. I don't have the $1 billion. What's the general opinion of Russians when it comes to Chinese people? The general opinion is based on all of the like State Department propaganda that they dump here. That the Chinese, well, first off, people like the Chinese a lot and have respect for everything that they've done. But there's a slight fear that they could overrun Siberia. I've been all over Siberia. There's no Chinese people there. And the Far East and all that. So on the one hand, there's a certain little paranoia that China might overrun the eastern part of the country. But there's also an extremely deep respect for the Chinese. The difference is that, and one of the things why people are like, but Tim, Russia has just shifted from being a colony of the West to a colony of the Chinese. No. Because the difference is between the Chinese and the West is that the Russian inferiority complex they talk a lot about here is rooted in the West, not in China. Russians never feel inferior to the Chinese. Even the most loathsome, self-hating Russian sees themselves as not particularly different from the Chinese. Because remember, on their racial hierarchy, Western people are gods. There's almost everyone else is just sort of a secondary garbage, and then I guess Africa at the bottom. That's the way that they sort of see the world in that sense. So the one nice thing about the future, and one of the reasons why people are like, oh my God, the Chinese, they're going to sucker Putin in. None of the Russian leadership, trust me, I've met some very powerful Russians who are still, after all these years, swimming in their inferiority complex. It doesn't apply to China. It doesn't. And that brings hope for me for the future. I think there is a vested interest by the elite in the United States to keep different ethnic groups divided. It sure seems like it. The UK and the US used this against countries that they conquered, like India, for example. It was much easier to subjugate a people when they're divided, fighting each other, than united against the government. And it also, Daniel, has to tie into the fact that, to be honest, the people, the elites, there's absolutely no connection. In fact, during our interview on my channel with the father of the alt-right, Paul Gottfried, he even said that basically the American elite, they may, throw some nice words at the working class white Americans, but they actually revile and despise working class white Americans. They unlike the Russia of old, where the Tsar and the aristocracy, they maybe didn't have much respect for the peasants, but they sort of knew they were the same ethnicity. Not anymore. Our rich people think that they are in godmen of Elysium. They are like the what are they called? Who are the elites of the film Zardoz, who lived in the clouds? Well, basically they're like the Zardoz elites. And we're all down here like Sean Connery wearing a diaper. Yes, like I mentioned, this goes back to Bacon's Rebellion. Kentucky actually had the strictest Jim Crow laws, which seems weird. Kentucky didn't have very many black folks, so why? Well, Kentucky was at the heart of the organized labor struggle for mines. And the IWW and United Mine Workers were organizing miners of all different colors. So the mine operators petitioned the government to basically make it illegal for black and white miners to even be in the same meeting hall. The owners didn't care about white people or black people. They cared about their money. Division helped the bottom line. Oh, dude, and one thing, too, I think this is probably everywhere, but, man, if you are a person who is as mentally challenged as I am and watches as many documentary movies as I do, so much of what happens within, I would say I'm more knowledgeable, again, about American culture, but so much of what we do in America is really, down to stuff like that. Like, why do we drink orange juice in the morning? Because oranges were cheap to produce and there was an excess of them, and they had to do something with them. So they made it part of our culture that we all drink orange juice in the morning. Never happened historically. A pure phenomenon of the sort of mid 20th century, mid 20th century modern, and all other sorts of stuff just like that. Unbelievable. Why are there so many trucks in America? The special category that trucks get put into that tends to make them about as cheap as a sedan. He's not. Let's see. Hell, Biden. Wait. Biden is promoting civil discord here in America. He is, and he's accusing Trump of doing awful things on a particular day in January. Interesting. The hypocrisy is shocking. The original Rainbow Coalition had the Black Panthers, the Young Patriots, and groups that represent Asian, Hispanic, and other groups. Every single group had an ethnic identity. They are proud of who they were, but they worked together for common interests against the rich and powerful. Oh my gosh. It's almost like when the masses have sort of rallied around the president in Russia. It's almost like that. Interesting. Folks from the hollers with Confederate flags were marching arm in arm with Black Panthers so they could all feed their kids, have housing, and have a future. A future where some people might interact if they want to, and some people might want to be kind of separated into their own little zone if they want to. Amazing how that works. It's almost like Russia. One can and one should be proud of their heritage and identity. I agree fully. But that doesn't mean that it has to be against anyone else. And that against anyone else. And that's why, my friends, when I've told you this before, but it bears repeating because we're talking about it. Any European nationalist group, if it's Russophobic, it is completely acceptable. If their ethnic sort of supranationalism doesn't involve Russia, banned, crushed, no parades for you. It's all that simple. You can be racist as long as your racist serves those foreign policy goals, baby. This message makes sense in Russia because the government wants a society that can work together. In America, the government and bosses want division. And again, this is like our recent conversation with Matt Arrett. I'm just sitting there and like, why does British foreign policy always have to do things in an evil way? Can't you do the old catch more flies with honey? Isn't that the expression? Maybe it's not. Maybe I just made it up. It seems like a better way to do it, but they don't. And it just seems like there's this addiction to this pointlessly Machiavellian foreign policy. There's a little bit of Machiavellianism. It can cure what ails you. But, man. Oh, the Eternals were in Zardoz, so thank you. So essentially, we really have the movie Zardoz. I bring it up because if it wasn't done so badly, it actually is in some ways a good mirror of what's happening. For those who don't know, you essentially have like a global peasantry, and then there are the exterminators. And in a lot of ways, so basically they're the Eternals in the clouds, and they sort of give guns and weapons to the exterminators to sort of cull the population. Because the Eternals are worried that if there's too much population growth and all that, that the peasants are just going to sort of, eat everything and they'll have nothing left. Because despite the fact that the Eternals are immortal, they still have to eat in order to not die. But on the other hand, they all hate their lives and actually secretly wish for death because they're absolutely, completely miserable and unfulfilled. And this movie is a very good model for, I think, the way the world actually works right now, especially the way some of these elites behave, especially our more transgendered Epstein, I can't even remember how to say it in English, Epstein Island type of elites. They're kind of like the Eternals. Bill Gates might as well have just been cast. We might as well send him back in time and put him in the movie Zardoz as the head Eternal. I mean, it really, again, this movie was filmed in kind of a schlocky way, but like the overall concept of it is brilliant. Love it. Love it. Let's see, Daniel. Oh, hey, Daniel. Nice to see you. I found your comment about Thailand interesting. I live in Southeast Asia, and I don't necessarily find it easier to relate to people from my country versus the local people here when it comes to shared background. Oh, okay. In fact, there are those of us who prefer not to rub shoulders too much with our countrymates because if we wanted familiarity, we could just stay at home. Not to mention, yeah, that's a little bit of how I am, to be honest, about that. But still, when you talk, okay, I can put it this way. We'll take Russia out of this. When I'm in Russia, and I've been in a sort of a group of people, when I was younger and actually went out and had a social life, and there are more Americans, I can always join in the conversation easier than more when it was a British circle. Because once it's a British circle, it's like, I know how cricket works. I think cricket's a fantastic sport, but like, I don't know the history of it, so I can't comment on the cricket players. And it's like, oh man, I think I watched Faulty Towers. So you're getting into cricket, Faulty Towers, Ronnie O'Sullivan, I don't know, a lot of stuff, and it's just you're just not in the vibe, But anyways, Daniel continues, but for me it's much harder to relate to our own people when it comes to core values. Western values promote a lot of behaviors that factor into our daily lives and interactions without us really being conscious of it. And I think it is ultimately drives the deeper sense of group affinity and tribalism versus more superficial familiarity. Maybe. I can kind of see that. That's one of those ones I'd like to sit around and chew on. American politics today reminds me of the movie Idiocracy. Maybe. But, dude, there are certain things about Idiocracy, although I never actually saw it in full. Idiocracy makes one thing that I think was pretentious is they hated on pro wrestling. And to be honest, I think there's actually a lot to be gained from pro wrestling because it is the ability for someone to create a conflict-based drama that's essentially based on nothing. And I think that's very important in politics. And I think the sort of logic and methodology of pro wrestling could actually be very positive because living in Russia, when you deal with a society where no one has any pizzazz, and people may have the right moral standings but have absolutely no idea what their morals are, nor the ability to communicate to other people what their morals are, you start to miss Ric Flair. You miss your Ric Flair, your Hulkamania brother, and all that stuff. So Yeah, I don't know. So with Idiocracy, I can kind of see where they were going with that, um, but another thing is that is it that human beings are stupid because what actually motivates us to make decisions, especially political decisions, are emotional and irrational? Because that's never going to change. Human beings make irrational decisions for almost everything they do. So, that's not going to change. Sorry, I meant to say that it's easier to relate to our own people because of deeper shared values. Oh, okay. Well, now we're more and more in line here. I could maybe see how someone might want to be removed from society, as I am someone who's very far removed from society. That's another reason why you'll enjoy living, again, that you'll love living at the American Village, because I don't want to be in your business. I don't want to know what you're doing. I don't know what to want to find out what Susie said to Sally. I don't care. So it's amazing. It'll be an amazing experience to have a homeowner's dictatorship of one man who does not care what you do. It'll be the true Russian experience. Well, anyways, guys, we seem to be out of comments. No one raised their hand today, which is fine. Who cares? Anyways, the month is ending. I am very tired. We have good village news that the NGO that we need to do the village, it's about 2 days from being officially put into function, which is great. We're so close. We've had some major media coverage. We're getting people like sort of rallying around the country who want to help out with this. It's happening. It's really happening, but it's very, very draining. And it's draining to the point where I wanted to do at least 4 live streams a month, kind of like one a week. And I looked at my big list here that I have, and I'm like, how many live streams do I have this month? 1. That's not good. that sucks. That's not good at all. Oh, well, at least now we have 2. We did a bunch of interviews this month, so that's cool. There's like 7 interview videos. That's nice. That's decent. That's good enough for the YouTube algorithm. That probably hates me because I use the word Russia too much. Oh, well, whatever. Zippy says, small point, they originally wanted Burt Reynolds as the lead in Zardoz. Well, again, it kind of didn't matter because Zardoz was just filmed in a very campy, schlocky way. And again, but the idea of it, the real overall core idea of it is really, really, and especially the brutality of it, of the absolute, how on the one hand, the Eternals are absolutely murderously hateful and terrified that the peasantry will take all of their ability to eat bread. But at the same time, they so deeply desire to die. And then they send the exterminators down to kill people, but the exterminators are sort of view the Eternals as being godlike, so that's what motivates them to kill. It's really, really dark and interesting, and a very pessimistic look at humanity that I think reflects a reality, as I mentioned earlier. But when you film it with, but you kind of film something like that, like a cheapo version of Logan's Run with really weird costumes. No. Someone's really typing. I can see, like, I've been reading the last few messages, and someone is just pounding the keyboard according to the little icon there. Oh, Joe or John, I call you both. Hello, you wanted to talk or no? You don't have to. No one has to talk. It's never mandatory. No? Well, that's okay. Anyways, I'm feeling a little bit today like a low-quality Jay Dyer. I'm just dropping truth and information bombs. But no one does it like Jay. In fact, if anyone has Jay's contact, we should have him back on the show. I interviewed him like a long time ago. That guy's fascinating. You want to talk about a guy who works hard? Oh, you think I work hard? Man, Jay Dyer is the work machine. Sorry, Joe, I couldn't hear you, but that's okay. We're going to call it a night. How long have we been talking here? I think for over an hour. Shouldn't it say? You'd think it would, but it doesn't. Oh, Ann wants to talk. Okay. Hello. Hi, Ann. Usually your microphone works.
Yeah, hi. No, just have to send you a word of encouragement if you're so tired. Tim, you're doing wonderful. And maybe for some topics, aren't there about 81 countries that want to join BRICS coming up? Things
Well,
like
one
that.
thing is, did I even post this? Oh my God. So hold
I
on,
think
Ann.
so.
I'm going to do this now because I have my document with all my videos open anyways. We are going to share the videos, which I don't think I shared. This is bad because it seems like a lot more people prefer to look at my content on Telegram and click on it rather than subscribe to YouTube or Rumble or BitChute, which is okay. Hey, freedom of speech, man. Freedom of online interaction. So we have one video about the BRICS economy with Dmitry Kostin, if you remembered him. Dmitry has a little bit of an accent, but he brings the philosophy, the idea behind this whole BRICS economy. If you want to talk about economics in a philosophical sense, you're going to love these two. This two-part interview, essentially. So part one, excuse me, my nose is itching. Some people say when your nose itches, you're lying. I'm not lying. I think you'll enjoy it. So,
Thanks.
anyways, Anne, yeah, if there's anything else you want to say, or you're gonna vanish.
No, that's it for today. I think we're both
All
tired.
right.
That's it for today.
Thank you.
Next
Well,
time.
I'll just mute you there, but I just gotta say, don't worry, because the thing is with me, don't praise me too much till the village gets done. Don't we can't can't praise good intentions. Got to praise good results. We're getting real close to actually making this thing happen. And thankfully, due to this media coverage, we kind of already have Plan B and Plan C already lined up in case Plan A goes south. We're getting close. And I'm especially feeling good when I got that message from today from Timur that the NGO is 2 days from being officially in function. So close. We're getting there. We're getting there, gosh dang. All right. Anyways, there's a few more messages. Joe, do you want to try again? Here, because I let Ann speak. I was going to leave Ann speak. Joe, try again. Try your microphone again. You're at maximum ultra volume. Joe or John. And when you write JOH, there you are. Yeah. Hello.
I do have a default laptop mic. It's not the greatest in the world, so I do apologize for that. But you can hear me?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay. And by the way, you can call me Joe or John. Either way, it doesn't matter.
Oh, all right.
Yeah. Well, I understand you got to go. So instead of asking a really long-winded political conversation,
ask it. It makes the videos more interesting. Let's. Number one is keeping videos interesting. Ask it. Go nuts.
Oh, okay. Well, you won't get in trouble if I say certain keywords or whatever, right? Some places.
It would be really nice if you didn't use racial slurs and a lot of terminology related to sex, especially the sale of it and the violent procurement of it.
Oh, okay. I got you. I grew up at a time when there wasn't this much censorship, and it's so weird now to live stream with people, have them tell me that there's this list of things that I can't say or YouTube will get rid of them. But I only semi-related, but have you noticed the insane amount of accumulation of material that the West is staging near Sudan? And it's happening around the same time that Prigozhin has said that Wagner will actually be redeployed to Sudan. So do you think that this might be another convenient place for a flare-up of America attacking Russian interests in a new theater?
Okay. All right. Well, then let me mute you then, and then we'll get to that. Wow. That's a serious one. And you know what? I think that you should be the one doing the podcast, Joe/John, because I think you might be really onto something. I'm not quite super sure to the extent of Russia's interest. Russia's interest in Africa are kind of weird. To be honest, what they were doing in Mali with Wagner almost seemed more like not so much that they want to have these African colonies or something, but more that you just wanted to screw the French. And I'm not quite sure that of what exactly is going to happen in Sudan, but I can tell you one thing. Sudan is a location on the map, and it involves forces that are, okay, let's think about this. There are certain people, you know, in the Defense Department and all that, who may be starting to think that this whole thing in Ukraine didn't quite go the way they wanted to. I mean, yeah, what did they spend? Over $113 billion got shuffled around, which means some people got rich. So maybe it wasn't too bad. But this is a different ball game. This is a bit riskier. There's a little flavor of the third world, potential for a third world nuclear war. Maybe not quite what they were looking for. There could be a contingent that literally just wants to go back to having a sort of global war on something and having some sort of hot conflict to keep the money flowing. That is a conflict that is low risk, which would be Sudan, because the Sudanese have nothing. You know, again, I think for the corruption machine who has wasted our tax dollars, $2 trillion for Afghanistan, you know, start a conflict in Sudan. You know, well, at best, the Sudanese have rocket-propelled grenades, and who knows how many they actually have. And that'll be a much more comfortable forever war, nation-building experiment to wait for another 20 years. If they choose to do that, you know, it's just a much better corruption game. So that's very possible. Would then Wagner want to enter that to kind of fight for it? Again, I think it'd be a massive mistake if Russia does exactly what they did in the Cold War, which didn't work, which is, again, try to get into this, like, again, we've got to always fight the United States everywhere that it happens to be because of multipolarity or something. That'd be a massive mistake. Russia needs to worry about Russia's interests, and an African Africa serves Russia's interests a lot more than a colonized Africa. But in general, Russia really doesn't need to help any particular person there out. So, I don't know. You know, Russia's always had the bases in Syria. I believe they have a base in Vietnam. Cuba, obviously, having a good relationship with Cuba and keeping Cuba out of America's sphere of influence certainly has its perks, especially when the United States is pretty much on Russia's doorstep permanently now. But yeah, so I think you're onto something. I think what you said is more likely to happen than not. I would put it that way. So, actually, that was a very good topic. You know what? Maybe I'll have to find. You know what? We're gonna have to find a Sudanese political expert who can talk about Sudan. Recently, if you noticed, I've interviewed two, a former Somalian general and a Somalian who fought in the Marines during the same time period as the war when the Marines fought the Somalians, and then went to the Somalian side back. Whoa. So you should check out those interviews too if they're pretty interesting. The Somalians might have something to say about Sudan, but you never know. Maybe their view of things is a little bit Somali-centric. So, but anyways, I am going to go to bed. This is our last live stream for today. It was great being with you guys, and stay tuned. The American Village is going to keep going, and we're going to have more of these mental political videos. Remember, guys, I never really know what to think about these videos. I kind of just throw my thoughts out there, and I'm always amazed people watch them. Anyways, have a wonderful day, and I'll talk to you all later. Okay. And live stream.